Hello and welcome. I'm tremendously excited to bring you this interview with the wonderful Tarana Burke. Tarana, it's so lovely to see you again. Thank you for your powerful and transformative work, and it's especially special to do this celebrating International Women's Day. What does this day mean to you, and what should it mean for women and girls right around the world?
You know, I'm glad that we have a day to take stock in the contributions of women and women and girls. I'm also glad that we have a day to think about the challenges that face, particularly women and girls around the world. You know, I think sometimes it feels a little bit, it's frustrating that we have to have a day like this, but I'm grateful that we do, because otherwise it's hard to get people to stop and think about just how many challenges face women and girls around the world, from sexual violence to infant mortality to any number of things in between there, femicide, right, that affect women and girls. So when I think about International Women's Day, I'm sort of grateful that we do take a moment to stop and pay particular attention to the things that affect us.
Yeah, because there are so many issues on so many fronts. I mean, you founded Me Too more than a decade before it became viral with the hashtag in October 2017. I read an article, you wrote a fantastic article for Time magazine recently, and you wrote, while the movement was given a shot in the arm by hashtag Me Too, the idea that it would be the antidote to decades of entrenched ideas and behaviours is wildly unrealistic. To your mind, Tarana, what has the global attention to the movement achieved in the past 5 years, and what has it failed to achieve?
That's a good question, because I was very excited at first, right? And I'm still excited. I'm still grateful for the global attention, but I think it's been twofold, right? We've gotten so much attention, focus on the issue of sexual violence. We've got people to pay attention to it in ways that we haven't before. But in a lot of ways, that attention has been skewered by a public misunderstanding of the breadth and depth of sexual violence. It has been misrepresented in so many ways, and people have really not taken to heart this is really a public health crisis that we're dealing with. This is a social justice issue that we're dealing with. In a lot of ways, it's been made into sort of a salacious piece of gossip for people, like fodder for gossip and to dig into people's lives. And that's not really what it's about. And so because of the way it was made popularized, because it was a hashtag, and because it was on the backs of these sort of stories that were made big by the media, it's been hard for people to sort of separate that from the issue that affects people's material lives every day. So that's been a challenge, to get people to see it as not just something that's in the headlines, but these are affecting everyday people. Even the people in the headlines are human beings, right? Who have real lives, real feelings, who have real offenses committed against them, and are real people that we should be thinking about their humanity, not about our entertainment. So that's a challenge that we have to face every day.
I love that you've reframed it as a public health issue. I think that's tremendously important. Was one of the issues also the fact that when it became popularised with a hashtag through Hollywood celebrities, that a lot of people thought, well, this is an issue affecting privileged white women, that it didn't cover the broad base of society and everyone who's affected?
Yeah, I think that it was, again, because when you look at these Hollywood celebrities, we think about glitz, we think about glamour, and we are used to the gossipy part of their lives. We're very interested in what they wear and who they date and where they go. That's the way we think about them. We don't think about them as human beings. We think about them as objects and people who entertain us. And so it was hard to separate that way that we engage with them normally. And we also don't equate them with ourselves. We don't see ourselves in them. And so, of course, we wouldn't see ourselves in them in an issue like this. So, yeah, Me Too didn't, a lot of everyday people, particularly Black and brown people, particularly marginalized people, did not see themselves reflected in what they saw on a television screen, what they saw in the news. I mean, the stories that the news media told were not our stories, right? In Australia, I mean, for sure, we saw the same thing in the United States, but in Australia, you didn't hear the stories of what was happening with Aboriginal folks. You didn't hear the stories of what was happening in poor communities and disadvantaged communities, marginalized communities. You kept hearing the same stories. It's the same thing that happened in America. And so, you know, it's really hard for people to connect themselves, although it is all connected. Whether it's a huge star in Hollywood or a person, you know, a little Black girl from the southern part of America, we're still talking about bodily autonomy, right? We're still talking about consent. And we're still talking about the right to dignity and humanity for individuals, no matter what. When you strip it all away, we're still talking about that at the end of the day, and everybody has a right to that.
There also seemed to be a tendency to lean on stories involving the criminal justice system. Do you think that jail time and punitive measures actually work, or are we focusing on the wrong area?
I think that we are focusing on the wrong area, and it's a short answer, right? I think that the way we have seen carceral solutions rolled out historically have not worked. I think that until we find better solutions, that's what we have now. And so that the push to reform those things are not necessarily wrong, but we have to find better and different and more adequate ways to find accountability, because most survivors are not looking for carceral solutions. We're looking for real accountability. We're looking for less harm, right? We are more interested in harm reduction than we are in just putting people in jail, because we haven't seen results in those people coming out and those systems changing. And not to mention, sexual violence happens at the hands of people who create laws. Sexual violence happens at the hands of people who enforce laws. So as long as that's happening, we can't depend on those people to enforce the laws who are also causing sexual violence. The whole thing has to be upended. The whole thing has to be reevaluated, torn down, and rebuilt. And so that's why it's not part of the solution when it's also a part of the problem.
I'm reminded of that wonderful quote by Audre Lorde that you can't rebuild the house with the master's tools.
That's right.
Despite all of these flaws, the movement has been incredibly transformative. And one of the things you said to me when we were in Australia is that the power of storytelling is what this is all about. How do you feel knowing that this movement has provided the platform, the freedom, the information for so many people to tell their stories?
I think that is, we have to keep encouraging it. I say this all the time. The power of storytelling is immeasurable, but survivors also have to know that the most important person to tell your story to is yourself. So it's not about just people, testifying and telling their stories as far and wide as they can. It's about being able to get your story out of your body. It's, this is the thing I've been thinking about a lot about lately is where the role that misogyny and sexism and patriarchy plays is the stopgap in how we move forward. The book that I'm writing now and the work that I'm doing now is really about how the role. This is totally different, right? It's not a departure for me, but it's a departure for some. It'll feel like a departure for some people because I'm talking about grace, and grace as a politic and how we move forward as a movement, but how we move forward as a people, right? How we move forward together. When I think about the stories we tell, I think about men and women and how we hear things differently and why that's a stopgap all of the time, oftentimes, right? Because oftentimes when you have a woman who stands up to tell her story, and I'm being gendered for a moment. This can happen for trans folks. This can even happen for men. But oftentimes when a woman stands up to tell her story, there are groups of folks who hear a man's life being ruined, right? And there are other groups of folks who hear a woman's life being saved. And that is fundamentally part of the problem. That there are people who cannot hear a woman's life being saved. They only hear a man's life being ruined. And as long as we have that impasse and they can't find the grace to see a woman's life that needs to be saved, and they can only, because of patriarchy and misogyny and sexism and the way that those things have a chokehold on us as a society, they can only see a man's life being ruined. That is why we can't move forward as a movement, because you need a revolutionary type of grace, not the kind of grace that just turns the other cheek and only allows for a small bit of people who have who show up in a particular way to be allowed through, but all people. We need people to be able to hear when I tell my story about how my body was affected, how this thing has been a burden on me. I need you to hear this as a way for me to save my life. Not just not just trying to ruin somebody's life. And that's an impasse that we have, right? That makes it hard to move forward as a movement. It's why we struggle, and why we can only come up with carceral solutions, and why we can't figure out what real accountability looks like. Because we live in a world that is shaped around saving that man's life and is uninterested in allowing that woman to save her own life.
That is so wise. I can't wait to read your book, because we really need to bridge that gap. Particularly, that's the gap, particularly for the next generation. You know, when I hear some of my son's friends talking, some of my daughter's friends talking, and the very different lenses through which they view the world. Speaking of the future, the theme for this year's International Women's Day is cracking the code. And I'm interested in your thoughts on the role technology can play in this, whether it's through sharing stories, connecting grassroots movements, or, the negative side of it, women and girls particularly being trolled online and abused in that online space.
Because people have conflated us with some larger organizations and larger entities, but we really are small. I run an organization, Me Too International has 12 staff people. We don't have a lot of resources. We call ourselves a small organization with the big name. And because of that, we have had to be really smart about how we go about solving, responding to Me Too's prominence. And we do a lot of that with technology. We do a lot of that digitally. And so I believe in the power of technology. We have created, we own like 4 different digital platforms. We call it, I forgot this phrase that we use. Digital direct service. Because there are very few resources online that are culturally responsive and culturally competent that speak to the depth and breadth of survivorship that exists in the world. And so we have been constantly curating the resources that we have online to speak to all the various ways and entry points that survivors show up, particularly after Me Too went viral. So I very much believe in technology as the future for how survivors will survive and how they will thrive. We have something called Survivor Sanctuary, which is this beautiful online tool that we developed that allow people to go at their own pace, right? Everybody's not going to call a 1-800 number. Everybody doesn't have access to therapy. Everybody just doesn't have the resources or even the mental dexterity to go to group therapy or to do the sort of traditional things that have been available. And so we've created these digital resources to allow people to figure out where they are and how they want to move forward. Because we know we needed to respond, but we don't have the resources, financial or human resources, to respond in the way that others have been able to. So I very much believe in that. I also believe it's the way to counteract and fight some of the bullying and the negativity online. We have to be as active, if not more active, than those trolls and monsters and negative gremlins that are out there online, to show them that we're out here too. I don't think we can't get rid of the internet or computers or, our children, this is where they live. This is the space that they occupy. So that we have to meet them there. And we have to figure out how to make it as safe as possible. It has to be a priority for us. And so that is something that I'm very, very excited and passionate about. I don't think our children, I think, we have to temper, airtime and computer time for our kids. And they should have fresh air. They should be out. I still believe in that as well. But for the time that they do spend on TikTok and Instagram and all of these other things, we have to be very committed to making those spaces safe for them. And so I think that is part of the future for sure.
Yeah, 100%. I've just finished writing a book on bias in technology, particularly artificial intelligence and how that's embedding bias in the next generation. We've really got to keep an eye on that. But I agree with you in that we need to play a part in this. We can't be anti-tech because it's like saying you're anti-air or anti-water. This is a necessity. How passionate are you about more women getting into tech and particularly more people from marginalised communities getting involved in the industry so we can create the future?
Oh, absolutely. Particularly AI is a little scary to me in that, I just watched a video about the future of those deep fakes where people can sort of fake, like what we're doing right now, create videos that look like us. And, I just think there have to be people who are a diversity of people with a particular ethic, not just people of color or women, but we need people of color and women who have a particular ethic when they get in there. Because just because you are a woman or because you are, a person of color doesn't mean that you have a particular ethic. So I think it is important that we are training a broad spectrum of people who have a particular way of thinking and analysis about the future of tech and AI and those kind of things, and understand that this has to be ethical and have integrity about it as well.
You are doing so much different work across many different areas. Tarana, you have a brain the size of a small planet. You are phenomenal. But I was conscious when we spent time together here in Sydney that this work takes its toll. How can we support you? How can we support the people doing this work? Because it takes a village, doesn't it? It can be really wearing on one person like your good self.
It is. Well, thank you for asking that question, first of all. There are people just like me all across the world, really. We are actually trying to build a network of folks who are not as visible. But really, the most helpful thing is for people to talk about this movement that in a way that they hear us talk about it, right? Contrary to the headlines, contrary to the things that you see in the media, we are 5 years in now, and the thing that I said that was going to happen every year of the last 5 years is now happening. People are less interested. People are less connected. It is not it's not the sexy topic anymore. And now is when the real work begins. Now is when we have to really dig in. We have the information. We know how big this issue is. We know how important it is. We don't need to be led by headlines. We don't need to be led by the media. We need to be invested. We mean the people, and the people who are affected by this. We need people to be as invested in this issue as they were when they first saw the first headline or the first hashtag. And that's what we need. We need people to educate themselves, read the articles that we put out, read the information, come to the website, donate, volunteer, train yourself, educate yourself, be invested, be connected. That is a super help to build this movement. We need the movement to continue. There will be ebbs and flows. There will be times when you don't hear it every day in the media, and that's okay as long as the work continues.
Finally, Tarana, where do you see the Me Too movement in another 5 years and another 10 years?
Well, certainly I see somebody else sitting in this seat having this conversation in 5 years at International Women's Day. I'll be 50 this year. And I have spent more than half my life doing this work. And I think this is young women's work, young people's work. I think that there should be somebody with fresher ideas, with lots more energy, who I can support from the shadows, we wrote our framework. I spent 4 years taking all the thoughts that I have had for the last 20 years, putting it in writing to build this framework so that this next generation of people can use that to build on, to say, I think this is great that you forgot something. And I have an even better idea. And I want to encourage that. So I hope that the next 5 years breeds just lots and lots and lots and lots of brilliance coming from all the folks that we have seen and touched over the last 5 and 10 and 15. I hope that this folks see just how important and how serious this is, that it is a public health crisis, that it is a social justice issue, and that it is inextricably linked to all of the major issues that we are fighting today. It's inextricably linked to access to abortion and reproductive rights, to gun violence, to all kinds of other issues along those lines that we're talking about. You cannot talk about police safety, mass incarceration, gun violence, reproductive justice without talking about survivor justice and sexual violence. All of those things are inextricably linked. And I hope over the next 5 years, we broaden our analysis so people can see that these issues are about what liberation looks like. The world that we're working towards includes all of these things together.
It has been so heartening and life-affirming to talk to you again, Tarana. Thank you for your generosity, your intellect, your wisdom. Please promise me you'll look after your good self. And thank you once again. Happy International Women's Day.
Happy International Women's Day to you, Tracy. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.